Please, forgive me. I was wrong.
I used to pray for this, and now that it's here, I do not want it.
Please, my son, I'm so sorry. I regret everything. Please forgive me.
He was 44 years old the day he watched his mother beg, on her knees, on a wet concrete porch, and felt absolutely nothing. That is the part he never tells anyone. Not the 20 years of silence, not the funeral he skipped, not the birthday cards that stopped coming when he was 19 and never started again. People can understand all of that. What they cannot understand, what he can barely say out loud even now, is that when the woman who gave birth to him finally came apart in front of him, sobbing, holding out the one thing she had hidden from him for 2 decades, the only thought in Robert's head was cold and clear and quiet as glass. He thought, I used to pray for this, and now that it is here, I do not want it. That is where this story ends. But to understand how a son gets to a place that hollow, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, because nobody is born able to look at their own mother and feel nothing. Somebody has to teach you that, and she did. And the reason she did is the thing she carried up those porch steps, wrapped in a dish towel, 20 years too late. Here is what the neighbors saw, for years, from the outside. A nice family in a modest house on the edge of Cleveland. A father who ran the hardware store on Route 9. A mother who kept the yard tidy and waved from the porch. 2 boys, close in age, both polite, both fed, both clothed, both sent to school with their hair combed. Nobody ever called anyone. No police, no bruises, no screaming through the walls at 2 in the morning. If you had asked a single person on that street, they would have told you the family in that house was fine. Ordinary, maybe even lucky. And that is the first thing you need to understand about what happened to Robert. Because the cruelty done to him left no marks a stranger could see. It was quieter than that. It was smaller than that. And in the end, it was far more complete than any bruise. Because you can recover from being hit. It is much harder to recover from being the child a mother decided, somewhere deep down, she simply could not bring herself to love the way she loved the other one. And there was a reason for that. A specific reason. It had a name and a face, and Robert would not learn it until it was almost too late to matter. Now, if you knew the family, if you were inside that house, you would have caught it. Little things. The older boy's science fair ribbon that stayed in a drawer while the younger boy's finger painting hung on the refrigerator for a year. The way dinner waited when Marcus was late, but not when Robert was. The way praise for Robert always seemed to arrive attached to a condition, always came right after he had done something for his brother, as if his mother could only stand to look at him when he was being useful to the son she actually wanted. None of it was a crime. You could explain away any single moment of it. That is exactly how it works. That is how a boy can grow up drowning an inch at a time and never be able to point at the day it started, because there was no day. There was only weather, a slow, patient, decades-long climate of being second. And here is what I need you to hold on to as we go, because everything turns on it. Robert always believed his mother favored his brother for no reason at all, that it was just bad luck, just the random unfairness of a parent's heart. He was wrong. There was a reason. And when you finally learn it, you are going to want to go back and watch the beginning of this story all over again. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because I want to be honest with you about what kind of story this is, so you know what you are staying for. This is not the story of a monster. It would be easier if it were. This is the story of an ordinary woman carrying a secret so heavy that it bent the love in her own home out of shape for 18 years. A secret she guarded so well that even the son it was destroying never once suspected it existed. And it is the story of what that son became, 4 states away, on the far side of a vow that he would never again wait by a phone for a call that was not coming. And it is the story of the afternoon, 20 years later, when everything that woman had buried finally clawed its way up out of the ground and stood on his porch in the rain and knocked. Keep one question in your mind from here on out. Why did she really do it? Hold that. Everything is going to come back to it. The two boys were born 19 months apart. Robert first, Marcus after, in a house where money was always a little tighter than anyone admitted out loud. Walter Callahan worked 6 days a week at the hardware store his own father had opened. And he was a decent man in the way that a lot of men of his generation were decent, which is to say he provided. He did not raise his hand, and he almost never said what he was actually thinking. He believed a man's job was to keep the lights on and the roof from leaking, and that the softer business of a family, the talking and the noticing and the loving out loud, was his wife's department. But there was something between Walter and his older son that never quite fit that arrangement, something warmer and more deliberate than a tired man usually manages with a quiet child. And for years, Robert simply took it as luck, the one good thing in a house that mostly overlooked him. He did not understand, could not have understood, that his father's tenderness toward him was not luck at all. It was a choice Walter made, on purpose, every single day, to correct for something, to make up for something, to stand between Robert and a truth that Walter had decided, long ago, the boy should never have to carry. Diane had wanted a big family and gotten two, and to the outside world she loved them the same. But from the very beginning, something in her leaned toward the younger boy in a way she could not have explained to anyone, least of all herself. When she looked at Marcus, she saw only Marcus, a clean slate, a child who belonged wholly to the life she had chosen. When she looked at Robert, though, some days, in certain light, her face would do a small, complicated thing and then close over, and she would turn away and busy herself with something, and no one ever asked her why, because you do not ask a mother why she looked at her own son like that for half a second. But Robert saw it. Children always see it. He spent his whole childhood cataloging that half-second flinch and building theories about what was wrong with him to cause it. And not one of his theories was correct, because the thing that was wrong was not in Robert at all. It was in his mother's past. It had happened before he was even born, and he was simply the living reminder of it, walking around her house every day, wearing a face she could not always bear to look at. Robert was the kind of child who noticed things, and he noticed the flinch most of all. He learned to read the tone of the house before an argument, the tightness in his father's shoulders when the store had a bad week, the exact pitch of his mother's voice right before she lost patience. And he noticed that when he brought home a good grade, she said good, put it on the counter, and turned away. But when Marcus brought home anything, she lit up in a way Robert knew, very early, he was never going to earn. So he stopped trying the normal way and started earning her sideways. He became useful. He fixed things. He was 8 the first time he took apart the leaking faucet, laid every piece out on a towel in the order he removed them, and put it back together so it stopped dripping. And when his mother tried the tap and it worked, she said, "Well, look at you." And Robert lived on those 4 words for a week. He kept a coffee can of loose bolts and screws under his bed because he liked knowing where things went, and because a boy who can fix the faucet is a boy his mother has to be grateful to, at least for an afternoon. Remember that coffee can. It is the last thing he takes when he leaves, and it tells you everything about who he became. But here is the detail that will haunt you once you know the truth, so let me plant it now, gently, and let you carry it. It was Walter, not Diane, who taught Robert to fix things. Walter, who brought him down to the store on Sundays and put a wrench in his small hand and showed him how a thing comes apart and goes back together. Walter, who framed the boy's first repaired faucet as a triumph, while Diane was in the next room going quiet. A man passes his trade to his son. That is the most ordinary thing in the world. Except Walter did it with a particular intensity, an almost desperate care, as though he were trying to build something into the boy that would hold, some certainty of belonging that could survive whatever the boy might one day discover. Robert felt the warmth and never questioned the reason. Why would he? You do not question the one adult in the house who makes you feel like you matter. You just stand a little closer to him, and you learn to love the smell of machine oil, and you have no idea, none at all, that the man teaching you is not obligated to love you, and has chosen to anyway, harder than anyone will ever choose you again. There was one afternoon, Robert about 12, that he would remember for the rest of his life. He had spent 2 weeks building a model bridge for a school engineering competition, cutting and gluing balsa wood every night at the kitchen table, and it won first place out of the whole district, a blue ribbon, and his photograph in the local paper. He brought it home and set it on the counter and waited, and he genuinely believed this time would be different, the way only a child who has been disappointed 100 times can still somehow believe. But Marcus had struck out at a baseball game that same afternoon and come home in a mood, and Diane looked at the bridge, said, "That is nice, Robert, that is really nice," and then turned her whole body toward Marcus and spent 40 minutes telling her younger son that striking out did not matter, that he was the most gifted boy on that field, that one day he would show them all. Robert stood in the kitchen holding his first place bridge, the bridge that won, and understood fully and forever that there was no achievement large enough. The scale was not weighted against him. The scale did not exist. He was simply not on it. But someone had watched the whole thing from the doorway, his father. And what Walter did next is a thread you will not understand until the very end. Because Walter did not say anything in the kitchen. He never did. But that night he came up to Robert's room, and he sat on the edge of the bed, and he asked the boy to show him the bridge, and he held it and turned it over in his big, careful hands and looked at every joint, and then he said something Robert never forgot. He said, "Your grandfather built things with his hands too, and you have got more of him in you than anyone in this house." And then he took the boy's photograph from the newspaper, the one of the serious 12-year-old beside his bridge, and he folded it and put it in his wallet, and he kept it there. And Robert did not know that, would not know it for over 30 years, would not know it until the wallet was in a drawer and the man was in the ground. Walter, who had every reason under heaven to love this boy the least, loved him the most, and carried his picture next to his heart for the rest of his life. Sit with that for a second, because in a few minutes you are going to learn why Walter had every reason to love him least, and it is going to break something in you. Before we continue, if this is holding you, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from, and hit subscribe, because we are coming up on the moment that changed everything, and I do not want you to miss it. By high school, Robert had become a small adult, a paper route, and then 2 jobs, handing part of every paycheck to his mother without being asked, because the store was dying, and being useful was the only role in that house that reliably got him seen. Marcus, 2 grades below, had no job and took money from Diane's purse in amounts everyone pretended not to notice, already showing the lifelong talent for finding people who would carry him. And Walter's store on Route 9, the one his own father built, was going under, the big box chains bleeding away his customers a few at a time, and Walter too proud to say how bad it was, taking out loans against the house in the dark. The only person who sensed the ground shifting was the older boy who noticed everything and said almost nothing, and who quietly handed over more of his paycheck, buying his family a few more months, never thanked, never even acknowledged. Robert was 19 the night it broke for good, and he had a plan, a real one, the first thing in his life that was fully his. He had been accepted to a state school 2 hours away, and had saved for it with the ferocity of a boy who understood that leaving was the only exit. He was weeks from going, and then Diane sat down across from him at the same kitchen table where the bridge had once stood ignored, and she asked him for the money. Not for the store. For Marcus, who was 21 by then and already in trouble. Some scheme collapsed, some debt owed to the wrong people, and family helps family. And Robert had always been the responsible one. She said it like a gift she was bestowing. The responsible one. As if the title were payment enough for the future she was asking him to hand over. And Robert, for the first time in his life, said no. He did not shout it. He just said no, quietly, and watched something close down in his mother's face. And what she said back, is the sentence he carried for 20 years. She looked at him, more disappointed than angry, and she said, "Marcus would never make me ask twice." 6 words, said like an old settled fact, like she was simply observing the weather. But it was the second thing she said that night that Robert never repeated to a living soul, because he did not understand it, and it frightened him. As she stood to leave the kitchen, quietly, almost to herself, she said, "You are so much like him." And Robert thought she meant his father, and felt, for one confused instant, something almost like pride, because being like Walter was the only good thing about being in that house. He did not know, he could not have known, that she was not talking about the man who raised him. She was talking about a man Robert had never met, a man whose name had never been spoken in that house, a man Robert did not know existed. His mother had just told him the entire secret of his life, out loud, in 6 exhausted words, and he had heard it as a compliment and gone upstairs to pack. That is the cruelty of a secret. It can be sitting right in front of you, said to your face, and still stay buried, because you do not have the one piece of information that would let you understand what you just heard. He packed over 2 days, and it haunts him even now that it took 2 days, that his mother watched him fold clothes into a duffel bag across 2 entire days and never once came to his door. If she had fought him, cried, grabbed his arm and said please, he might have stayed. But she let him go the way you let go of something you have already decided you can live without, and that silence hurt worse than any argument, because an argument would have meant she cared enough to have one. On the second morning, he put the duffel and a cardboard box in the car, and the very last thing he packed was the coffee can of bolts from under his bed, because a man never knows when he will need to fix something, and because it was the only thing in that house that had ever been truly his. He left the model bridge on the shelf. He drove south and did not look in the mirror, though every animal part of him wanted her to be standing on that porch. And she was standing at the window, watching him go. And what she felt in that moment is a thing we will come back to, because it is not what you think, and it is the key to all of it. What Robert did with the next 20 years is the part people find hardest to believe, because there was no revenge in it. None. He did not plot. He built. The first years were brutal. A warehouse job that wrecked his back. Night classes he was too tired to stay awake in. A rented room with a mattress on the floor and a window that looked at a brick wall. But he had one advantage Marcus would never have, and it was the terrible gift his mother had accidentally given him. He knew how to need nothing. He knew how to keep going with no one behind him and no safety net below, because he had never had one, and so its absence did not frighten him the way it frightens people who once knew its comfort. Everything that starved him as a child had, in the cruelest way, prepared him for exactly this. And here is the irony that sits at the dead center of his whole life, so let me say it plainly and let it land. The wound his mother gave him became the engine of the success she would one day come crawling to be part of. She made him a man who could survive being abandoned. And then she abandoned him, and he survived, but you still do not know why she did it. Keep holding that. We are almost there. He met a woman named Sarah in the 4th year of night classes, and she was the first person in his life who looked at him and did not measure him against somebody else. She just saw him, the quiet, careful, watchful man he was, and liked what she saw, and it took him nearly a year to believe it was real, because he had no framework for being wanted simply for existing. He told her everything eventually, the bridge, the 6 words, the coffee can, and she listened, and never once told him he was overreacting, or that his mother surely loved him really, and that refusal to explain away his pain was the beginning of him healing from it. They married in a small ceremony no one from his family attended, because no one was told. He built a logistics company out of one leased truck and a spare bedroom full of paperwork, and it grew slowly and nearly died more than once. A partner who cheated him. A year they almost lost the house, and he did not quit, because quitting is a luxury for people with somewhere to fall back to. By his 40s, he had 30 employees, a house he owned outright, 2 children he would have walked through fire for, and a life his mother had not witnessed a single day of. She did not know Sarah's name. She did not know she had grandchildren. The news of the family he left reached him only through Grace, his mother's younger sister, the one person from the old life who refused to lose him, calling a few times a year. And through Grace, across 2 decades, Robert watched the Callahans come apart from a distance. He learned that Walter died 8 years after he left. The store finally closed and something in Walter closing with it, and Grace gave him the date of the funeral and left the choice to him, and Robert did not go. It is the one decision in this whole story he would take back, because Walter had never been the one who wounded him. And here is the terrible thing Robert did not know as he made that choice. The thing that turns his absence at that funeral into the deepest regret of his life. Walter was the only person in that family who had loved him without condition and without obligation. And Robert would soon learn that Walter had a reason not to. A reason most men would have used as an excuse, and had refused to use it every single day for 19 years. He skipped the funeral of the one man who truly chose him, to punish the woman who never did, and he did it without knowing which was which. Hold on, it is coming. Meanwhile, Marcus was doing exactly what a lifetime of being caught had trained him to do, falling and always finding his mother's hands beneath him. A restaurant she funded that failed, a second business she funded with Walter's small life insurance. The money meant to keep her comfortable as a widow, poured into the bottomless well of a son who had never been asked to stand on his own. A marriage that ended, children he barely saw, and Diane, alone in that aging house, still making his excuses, because if you have ever loved someone who could not stop rescuing the person destroying them, you know she did not experience it as being robbed. She experienced it as being needed. Being needed by Marcus was the whole architecture of her identity, the story she told herself about her own life. And to stop would have meant admitting that the way she loved him had helped ruin him, and no parent alive is strong enough to look directly at that. So she kept writing checks into a fire and calling it love. She was going to go down with him. She very nearly did. Then one gray afternoon, Grace called Robert, and her voice was different, frightened, and she told him Marcus was gone. Not dead, gone, vanished a week earlier, and not empty-handed. He had cleaned out the last of Diane's savings, the genuinely last of it, the money standing between her and losing the house. And he had taken something else, a folder of old papers from the house. And the strangest part, the part no one could make sense of, was that Diane refused to call the police. Her son had robbed her and disappeared, and she would not report it, would not even say the word stolen, and Grace had run out of ideas, so she was calling Robert, the son who noticed things, because some instinct told her he might understand what was really going on. And Robert listened in silence in his warm kitchen, and what he felt was not triumph, though he had every right to it. It was a held breath. Because a report not filed is a question, and Robert had spent his whole life unable to leave a thing that did not add up alone. Why would she protect him now? What was in that folder that mattered more to her than the last of her money? He got in the car and drove north, telling himself and Sarah that he was not going for his mother. He was going to find out what happened to the house his father built. Before we go into that house, do me a favor, because the next part is the reason I could not stop thinking about this story. Tell me in the comments, right now, what you think that folder holds. Write your guess down. And then hit subscribe so you can see how close you were, because I promise you, almost no one guesses this. The town had shrunk the way towns do when you have grown and they have not, and the lot where the store stood was just cracked concrete and weeds now, and Robert had to pull over for a minute. The house was worse than memory, paint gone gray and peeling, the porch sagging at one rotted corner, the tidy yard his mother once waved at neighbors from now overgrown and sad. And when the door opened, the woman in it was not the powerful withholding figure he had carried for 20 years. She was small. She was old, worn down to something papery by 2 decades of pouring herself into a fire. She looked at him, and her whole face moved through 6 things at once. and Robert found he had nothing prepared for how strange it felt. The deep vertigo of facing a stranger who happened to have your mother's eyes. He told her at once he had not come for a reunion, said it flatly before she could arrange her face into anything hopeful, because he needed to protect himself from the small, treacherous part of him that even now, even at 44, still wanted her to say she was sorry. He asked about Marcus, and the astonishing thing, the thing that told him nothing had changed, was that even here, robbed and abandoned and weeks from losing her house, her first instinct was to defend the boy. "He is not well," she started. "He has had a hard time. You do not understand." And Robert felt the old cold thing close over his heart and almost walked out. But he had come for the house, and the house had one more thing to tell him. It was in the second drawer down, the one that always stuck, under takeout menus and dead batteries. A folder, torn nearly in half and shoved back in a rage. Most of it nothing, but underneath was a single page in his father's careful slanted hand, folded and unfolded so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. And it had Robert's name on it, and it stopped his heart, because it was not about money at all. It was a letter, addressed to him, written by a dying man, to be given to Robert after Diane was gone. And Marcus had found it first. He drove to the one man still alive who might explain it, Ted Bristow, his father's partner of 30 years, who opened his door and went very still and said, "You are the older one. You are Robert. I always wondered if you would come." And over the next 2 hours at Ted's kitchen table, the whole shape of Robert's life turned over. Ted asked him, carefully, how much he knew about his mother's life before she married Walter. "Nothing," Robert said. "She never spoke of it." And Ted nodded slowly, like a man confirming a sad thing he had hoped was not true, and then he told him. Before Diane married Walter, she had loved another man, loved him badly, the way you love once when you are young and it nearly kills you. And that man had left her pregnant and alone in a town that in those days did not forgive a woman for that. And it was Walter, steady, quiet Walter, who had loved Diane from a distance for years, who married her anyway, and gave the baby his name, and never once, not to a single living soul, treated that child as anything but his own son. That child was Robert. Walter was not his father by blood. Walter was his father by choice. And he had chosen him every day for 19 years, without ever asking for credit. Let that settle, because it turns every scene you have watched inside out. The half-second flinch when Diane looked at Robert, the flinch he spent his whole childhood blaming himself for, was never about him. It was about the man who abandoned her, whose face Robert wore a little more with every passing year. When she said "you are so much like him" the night he left, she did not mean Walter. She meant the ghost that walked back into her kitchen every time she looked at her firstborn. She could not love Robert freely, because loving Robert meant looking, every day, at the worst thing that ever happened to her. And Marcus, easy, charming Marcus, was the child of the marriage she chose, the clean slate, the son who carried none of that grief in his face. It was never that Robert was worth less. It was that Robert cost her something to look at, and Marcus cost her nothing. And a wounded person will always, always turn toward the one who does not reopen the wound. It is not fair, it is not right, but it is human, and it is real, and it explains everything. And the letter in the drawer, in Walter's dying hand, said all of this, gently, because Walter had known he would not be able to say it out loud, and he had wanted Robert to hear it from him and not stumble on it after. The letter told Robert the truth of his birth, and then it told him something else. It said, "I chose you before you could choose me, and I have never regretted a single day of it. And if you are reading this, then I am gone, and your mother is gone, and there is no one left to protect you from this except the truth itself. So here it is. You are my son, not the way the papers say, better than the way the papers say. Because a man who is stuck with a child has an excuse to resent him, and I never had that excuse, and never wanted one. You were the best thing I ever did that no one made me do. and Robert sat in Ted Bristow's kitchen holding a letter from a dead man who was not his father and was more his father than anyone would ever be. And for the first time since he was a child, he wept. Then Ted told him the last thing, the thing that explained his mother's silence. Diane had known the letter existed. Walter had told her, at the end, and she had hidden it for 20 years, not to protect Marcus, but because that letter would tell Robert the secret she had spent his entire childhood guarding with everything she had. She would rather her son believe she was simply a cold and unfair mother than have him learn the truth, because the truth meant confessing that she had let her own grief poison the way she raised an innocent boy. She chose to be hated for the wrong reason, rather than understood for the right one. And Marcus, digging for anything of value to sell, had found the letter, read it, and understood at last why he had always been the favorite. And rather than face his brother with it, he had taken the money and run, leaving the letter torn in a drawer for whoever came next. Robert drove back to the house with all of it sitting in his chest like a stone. And when he walked in, Diane took one look at his face and knew that he knew. And every pretense between them fell away at once. What followed was the conversation they had never had, 20 years overdue, and it did not go the way you would want. She did not collapse into a clean apology. She tried to explain, which was more human and more maddening. She said she had tried, God knew she had tried, to look at him the way she looked at Marcus, and some days she managed it, and some days she could not, and she had hated herself for it every one of those days, and had never found the courage to tell him why, because the why was her own shame and not his to carry. And Robert understood at last the whole catastrophe of his childhood. He had not been unlovable. He had been unbearable to look at, through no fault of his own, because he was the living photograph of a wound that never healed. He told her what it cost, plainly, not shouting, because shouting never worked in that house. The funeral he skipped, the wedding she missed, 2 grandchildren whose names she did not know. And she said the truest thing she said in the whole story, that she had always assumed there would be time, that she told herself for 20 years she would fix it later, and only now understood there had never been a later. There had only ever been now, and she had spent all of it hiding. Marcus turned up 2 days on, because Ted had made a call. The 2 brothers stood in one room for the first time in 20 years, and Robert braced for a reckoning that never came, because what he felt was not hatred, it was exhaustion. Marcus was not a monster. He was the other casualty of the same secret, a man softened past repair by a love that asked nothing of him. And now he stood there having robbed his own dying mother, unable to meet his brother's eyes. And here is the part that undid Robert. Marcus said, quietly, I read the letter. I always knew you got something from Dad that I didn't. I just never knew what it was. And now I do. He picked you. And Robert saw it then. The thing he had never once considered in 20 years of believing himself the wronged one. Marcus had been the mother's favorite, but Robert had been the father's chosen. Each brother had spent his whole life aching for exactly what the other one had, and neither had ever known the other was aching too. They were never enemies. They were 2 boys who each got half of what a child needs, and spent 40 years believing the other one got it whole. Robert had every legal right to take what Walter left him, and Walter had, it turned out, left him the house itself, quietly deeded through the same lawyer who held the letter, the one thing of value that remained. He could have taken it, put his mother out, left Marcus with nothing, and no one on earth would have blamed him. And for a few weeks that is what he intended. But something kept catching in him, and when he finally named it, it surprised him. If he took everything and left them ruined, he would be doing it not for justice, but to finally win, to be at last the son who came out ahead, and that would mean his mother's grief and his father's secret had worked all the way down to the bottom of him. So he did the thing no one expected. He let his mother keep the house for the rest of her life. He set aside enough, watched and limited, that Marcus could not simply swallow it. Not because either of them deserved it. Because keeping it all would have made him into someone he did not want to be. And the only way to win the game this family had played for 40 years was to refuse, finally, to play it at all. It was not forgiveness. Robert was clear with himself about that. Forgiveness was not a switch he could throw. It was something quieter, a man deciding what kind of man he would be, regardless of what had been done to him, which is the only real freedom any of us gets. And the forgiveness, when a small piece of it finally came, did not arrive as a scene. It came months later, when he drove back to Cleveland and brought his children, and let them meet the grandmother they had never known, not because she had earned a clean slate, she had not, but because he had decided his kids did not need to inherit his silence along with everything else. 20 years of it was enough. It did not have to become the family's permanent weather. And it was then that Diane finally gave him the thing she had carried to his porch that first rainy afternoon, wrapped in a dish towel gone soft with washing. The thing this whole story had been turning on from the very first minute. It was Walter's wallet, worn to the shape of the man who carried it. And inside, behind the cracked plastic window where another man might keep a license, was a newspaper photograph, folded and refolded until it was soft as cloth, of a serious 12-year-old boy standing beside a model bridge he had built with his own hands. Walter had carried it there for over 30 years, through the store's death and his own. The picture of the son he was not required to love, and had loved the hardest anyway. Diane had found it on his body and kept it, and been unable to throw it away and unable to send it, because sending it meant admitting all of it, that the man with no blood claim had treasured what she, the boy's own mother, could not bring herself to fully see. She put the wallet in Robert's hands and she said the words she could not say when he was 19. She said she was sorry. She said she had let her own broken heart cost her son a mother, and that it was the worst thing she had ever done, and that she had known it every single day. And Robert, holding the wallet of the dead man who chose him, the photograph pressed to his heart for 30 years, did not give a speech. He had none left. He just looked at this small old woman who had cost him so much and lost so much more. And he did the one thing that meant more than any words. He stepped back from the door, and he held it open, and he told her the children were getting hungry, and asked if she wanted to stay for dinner. It was not everything. It could never be everything. But after 20 years of silence, sitting at that table while his children talked over each other, and his mother learned their names for the first time, with his father's wallet in his coat pocket and the truth finally out in the open where it could stop rotting them all from the inside, it was enough. So let me leave you with the question this story left me with, and I want you to sit with it honestly, because it is harder than it sounds. Diane spent 20 years letting her son believe she was simply cruel, rather than let him learn the truth about where he came from. She chose to be hated for the wrong reason, instead of understood for the right one. Was that a monstrous thing to do to a child, or was it, in some terrible way, the only kind of protection she knew how to give? And if you were Robert, standing in that hallway with your hand on the doorknob and your mother falling apart on the other side, would you have opened the door? Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what you would have done. And if this story moved you, if it made you think of someone in your own family you have not spoken to in too long, subscribe and stay with us. Before you go, I've handpicked one more incredible story for you. If you enjoyed this one, I'm confident you'll love what's waiting on your screen next. Click it now, and let the next unforgettable journey begin. Thank you for watching Echoes of Tales. I'll see you in the next story.